tonight. I'm Diane Dobson. I'm the current CEO of the Renton Chamber of Commerce. I share that for awareness and title only. My thoughts and statements tonight reflect those which are personal and not reflective of any of the organizations or businesses. Tonight, I'm Diane Dobson. I'm the current CEO of the Renton Chamber of Commerce. I share, just as everyone here today, we'll make reference to someone's title or organization that they work for identification purposes only, and quite frankly, maybe for some awareness or consideration on approach or perspective as well. Renton Live was developed with the onset of COVID as a way to bring our community together, to keep people connected, to share how our businesses were getting out and getting involved, and to look forward together toward a future that lies ahead. With COVID, we've been given a hard reset, and many opportunities are presenting themselves on redefining the way that we do things, and what an opportunity we now have upon us. We would be negligent if in looking forward, we didn't acknowledge the realities in the world as they exist today. Maybe it's because our world was at home because of COVID. Maybe it's because we've become captive to the internet during our stay home. Maybe it was because our emotions are already on edge and we're struggling as a society to just survive. I've heard it referred to as the perfect storm. But whatever the cause, the senseless death of George Floyd captured the attention of the world. It demanded the attention of those who might not otherwise be aware, and prohibited the opportunity to turn a blind eye and look away to the injustices and systemic racism we are still experiencing today. Chambers are known to be conveners, connectors, and champions. And in our city of Renton specifically, we are all about community as well. And you can't say the word community without an emphasis on unity. And we've brought each of our guests here tonight very deliberately and with intent, as each of them are leaders within our community. And not just by the titles they hold, but the actions they exhibit, the words they express, and the genuine way they care about those around us and make this world a better place and lead from the heart. As trusted members of the community, we want to hear from you on ways we can bring people together to learn about racism and devise ways of challenging it. We want to counteract the systemic racism that still exists, which stems from the historic racism our country was built upon, and find ways of coming together in solidarity as we forge a new tomorrow. So please, let's take a brief minute to introduce ourselves, and we'll provide a window of awareness of who we are and why we're at the table. Dr. Smith, if we could start with you.
Okay, I am Linda Smith. I am organization Sky Urban Empowerment Transformation Center and a community advocate. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pamela Washington, and I'm currently proudly serving in the Renton School District as an elementary principal, serving the community at Renton Park Elementary. What brings me here today is just having the opportunity to continue engaging in necessary conversations. And I come as a thought partner, hoping to provide just opportunities for us to stretch and continue to think and grow as we think about how to continue to disrupt some of the cycles that are continue to occur.
Regina.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Regina Elmi. I turn off my phone. What brings me here is that I accidentally fell into Renton about close to 6.5 years ago. And originally I'm from the East Coast. And when I started understanding the landscape of Washington, my heart wanted to be in the South King County. So I moved out of Newcastle, only 6 minutes away, to fall into Renton, borderline and Renton School District. It was very intentional. And really, I'm really invested in my city, but I also know that we have a lot of work ahead of us. I am an advocate. I am the current executive director and the founder of the Somali Parents Education Board. But our work has pivoted in the last 3 years, and we don't only focus in a single ethnic community, and we're very much local, state, and national system change and advocacy, particularly in education and state funding. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Mina?
everybody. I'm Mina Merchant, and I've been a resident of Renton for almost 10 years now. In 2016, I founded a nonprofit organization called the Owl Project, and its main goal is to bring communities together through the creation of public art. So I'm very passionate personally about art and arts education and how it can help to bring very different people together and bond them and connect them to the place that they live in. I'm also a Pakistani American. I'm Muslim. I have 2 boys of mixed race, and so I feel really connected to the conversations that are happening right now and dedicated to our city and how we bring it forward. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mina. Mary?
Hi, my name is Mary Clymer. I am born and raised here in Renton. I am the current chair of the Renton Arts Commission. Like Mina, a lot with how art really is this wonderful communicator that brings everyone together. And I've kind of made it my platform to really be involved in the city and find my own voice. I'm here tonight by the generous invitation from Diane. Thank you. And I just think it's important that we show up and have these vulnerable conversations as leaders so that others know that it's okay to stand up and have them as well. My goal here today is to really just hold space for all you beautiful people and really listen and learn. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Efrem, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am from Fesaha with Boona Coffee here in downtown Renton, and I've been fortunate to be here for the last year and a half. I have a little bit longer history with Renton in that what brought us from our native land was an opportunity with Boeing, and so we came down here, and my father was working for Boeing for a number of years, and then when came time for me to look to open up and expand my business, Renton was one of the places that I was looking at. My uncle owns an auto body shop up the block, and he was like, "Hey, you got to come downtown Renton and check it out." And that's what brought me down here. And I've been fortunate in this last year and a half to be able to grow the business here and grow in the community and learn from the community and be a part. And it's just been an incredible experience thus far. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to many more years here too. So very fortunate. Thank you. And regarding kind of obviously this conversation here is really around the current situation and ongoing situation that we've had here in America. But I'm excited to kind of be involved in this conversation and see kind of what can come out of it as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Efrem. Rashad?
Hello, everyone. So Rashad Powell, I have the pleasure of serving as the Dean of Students at the Renton High School, going on about 10 years. I'm a lifetime Renton resident, with the exception of some time in college and playing professionally, internationally for a couple of years. Other than that, I've been right here in this community. Also started Renton Select Basketball about 5 years ago. Like most of you, I'm here because Diane invited me, and I want to be a part of anything that can help our community, young people, old, and all around, just be a better place, because I really love the city of Renton. So thank you guys all for having me.
Thanks, Rashad, and thanks for all that you do. Kevin Keys. It's weird calling you Kevin Keys and not Deputy Chief.
Hi, I'm Kevin Keys. I'm one of the assistant chiefs at the Renton Police Department. I've been with the city now for about 20 years. Absolutely love this city. Would not want to be anywhere else. It's been very good to me. And I'm really here tonight to hear suggestions, ideas, opinions on really how the Renton Police Department can continue to build relationship with the community, continue to build trust, and make Renton a better place for all of us. That's what's important to me.
Thanks, Kevin. Dr. Pattenaude?
Good evening, everyone. Honored to be here with all of you, and especially just privileged to be able to even be involved in a conversation like this with individuals like Dr. Smith, who's been so committed and leading for civil rights in our community. And similar to Rashad and Mary, I actually grew up in Skyway, but went to school in the Renton School District and have been really committed and wanting to serve a community that's given so much to me, and also realizing that you never just represent yourself. And I've had the privilege to have some opportunities because of having family that have had to endure some things in the city as well. And so I think about my mother, whose family, if you go up to Heritage Park, you'll see some names of some of the early Black families in Renton, and Shropshire is one of the last names you'll see up there. And so my mom and her family were some of the early Black families, one of the early Black families here in Renton. And I've had the opportunity to learn a lot from her experiences, and also I've been blessed to have my family's support throughout my career. And so all in all, just this community has meant a lot to me, and I'm proud to have the opportunity to serve and try to give back to the community.
Thanks, Dr. Pattenaude. James?
Hello, everyone. I'm James Alberson. I have been a resident of Renton for about 23 years now, 23 years in September. I moved out here from the Midwest and lived nowhere else in the Northwest. Absolutely love Renton. And when I started my business 10 years ago, the Renton Chamber was the first chamber that I joined, and eventually kind of worked the way up to being chair of the board, formally as of December, I guess. And wanted to be part of the conversation. I liked Pamela's words, to be a thought partner. I like that. From the invite from Diane, I'm honored to be here with all the others. And really, once again, just we don't necessarily have all the answers, but the key is to have the discussions and to have the honest and frank discussions that don't sugarcoat things, but really get to the heart of the matter to see if we can, just move things forward in a very positive and cooperative and peaceful manner, let's say. So that's who I am.
Thanks, James. Ed Prince?
Thank you so much, Diane. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Ed Prince. I'm a member of the Renton City Council. I have lived in Renton for 16 years now. My wife and I moved out here and absolutely fell in love with the community, but also fell in love with the sense of community in the community. I am beyond honored to take part in this because I feel like it's a groundbreaking conversation that should be had. And looking forward to adding whatever thoughts I can add.
Thanks, Ed. Armando?
Hello, I'm Armando Pavoni. Thank you very much, Diane, for putting this together. This is actually a fantastic forum. So I'm a lifelong Renton resident, raising two young boys here in Renton. Also, I must say, a proud graduate of Renton High School. Go Indians. I've owned a restaurant in downtown Renton for many years, and a few years back, 6 years ago, I decided to run for city office as a way to give back to the community. The community has been very supportive of our businesses along the way, and as of the beginning of the year, I've become the new mayor in Renton. So, it's honestly, it's challenging times, and people point that out, and it's a very difficult time to be an elected official, as Ed can vouch for. But what I will say is that Renton is very different. It's a unique city, and I think the fact that we're all sitting here together in this conversation, willing to have this conversation early on, is really identifies with the way Renton handles itself and works itself through problems and looks for solutions. I actually, I like James, had a thought when Pamela was speaking earlier, but it was a different thought. The words when she said disrupt the status quo. And that really kind of resonated with me. You know, you wonder, you think that you're moving in the right direction and doing the right things as a city or as an organization or as a police department. And what kind of dawned on me during last night's meeting is it really kind of takes some time, the disruption of the status quo, for us to have the reset. We spent years trying to develop relationships and trust in the community. And with the incidents in Minnesota and the tragic death of George Floyd, basically we go back and start from square one and ground zero. That doesn't mean it has to be a slow march, but we have to really go back and take a look at everything we're doing moving forward. And so I think my role here as a father and as a resident and a business owner is to sit and listen and better understand some of the issues and some of the solution to those issues. So, and once again, I want to thank you, Diane and Farid, for putting this on. This is really fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks, Armando. And Farid?
Hi, everyone. My name is Farid Askerov. I have a video production company here in Renton, Shutter Sauce. Renton's my hometown. You know, I've grown up here. I love this community. I love everybody that calls Renton home. I think being a part of this conversation is really, really necessary. It's not something that should be shied away from. The more that we can have positive conversations like this to move the needle and provide hope, the more that we can understand each other and communicate better and find common ground. So I'm just very excited that this is even happening. I think that's a breakthrough in and of itself. So thank you, Diane, for helping to facilitate everything.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thanks everybody for introducing themselves, sharing who you are, what you're here, or what brings you here. I too am a lifelong Renton resident. I'm 5th generation, and it warms my heart to be in amongst a group of individuals that are so vested within our community. Whether you've chosen to have your business here, you were raised here, you choose to bring your families here, and it brings me great hope in looking forward and the things that we can do together, which then brings us to kind of the topic of the hour, and that is the question that I have posed to everybody ahead of time or asked you to think about is, what does hope look like to you? What does justice look like to you? And how do you believe that we can come together in solidarity as a community moving forward? Pamela, do you want to lead us off?
Sure, thank you. Yesterday during our district leadership meeting, we were posed a question around reflecting on the past couple of months and then thinking about what do we hope for based off of what we've learned from the last couple of months. And one of the things I shared in my breakout group was that one thing I hope for is that sense of urgency, the ability to be innovative would not go away, and that we would continue with that. When COVID hit and we went to closure, we had to respond quickly, but we also had to think about, and we're thinking innovatively around addressing barriers. And there was a sense of urgency around addressing those barriers, and there was a collectiveness as we came together. And so when I think about right now and where we are here, I think my hope is that sense of urgency in light of the events that have been occurring continue, and is a catalyst for continued conversations that are necessary. One of the things I'm noticing is that there's a heightened awareness, and it's important for that heightened awareness, but we can't live there. You know, we've got to move forward from there. And so I think about the book that Dr. Martin Luther King wrote, Why We Can't Wait. And in that book, he was addressing when the Negroes were told, no, we have to wait for civil rights by the current administration, or we have to wait for segregation. there was a sense of urgency, like, no, we've been told we can't, we have to wait, and we can't wait. And I feel like right now, there is a collective sense of urgency as to why we can't wait to have those conversations. And so I know it takes risk. I know it takes vulnerability. It takes approaching through an inquiry lens. But again, I feel like it's so necessary, especially when I think about my son, who's 3 years old, but is a Black male that's going to be even entering into schools, and thinking about the conversations we're having as a staff, looking critically at curriculum. When we think about disrupting the cycles, one of the conversations that we're engaging in is looking at stereotypes and seeing how those stereotypes influence how we look at students, whether implicitly or intentionally or unintentionally. And so just the heightened awareness is very critical, but then not living there, moving forward in those critical conversations.
Thanks, Pamela. One of the things that you mentioned that, and I'll have full disclaimer here, disclosure that I'm ignorant to what I'm ignorant to, and so I ask a lot of questions, and my questions come from the heart with the true, genuine approach of understanding. One of the mentions you make is of the education and school system, and over the last week in particular, with some very candid conversations, I have really taken it upon myself to absorb myself into any of the additional education and awareness that I can, and what I have learned. You know, the comments had been made to me previously: educate yourself. And I thought, well, I'm very educated. I've gone through school. I understand. But what I have learned specifically over the last week is my education is what I was taught, and it may not have been the history that was learned, or excuse me, it was the history that was learned. It was not the history that was lived. And it is an awareness that that's painful, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody here today having these conversations to help us better learn and as a society better learn. And Pamela, thank you for touching on education and approach. That's, I believe, to be huge. So anybody want to jump in on the hope and justice and what that looks like for you?
Well, oh, Linda, were you gonna? Oh, okay. You're muted right now. Were you gonna say something, Linda? Did I jump on your? I'm sorry. Say it again now that you're unmuted.
Okay. She said, who wanted to go next? I said I would go.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you for having this conversation. As I think about what hope looks like, I think that hope is justice. And one of the things that we're reminded of is that Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So, and I think in injustices, we have to be able to name the injustices that we're dealing with in our society, in our community. So what brings us to the table today is the killing of a Black man, George Floyd, that we have watched over and over again. But it was not just George Floyd. It was Eric Garner, Michael Brown, 12-year-old Tamir Rice, EMT Breonna Jackson, and in our own backyard, Charlene Lyles, Emmanuel Ellis, and Malika Perry, who was shot 84 times. And the many unknown names that we're not able to name tonight. So the fire has always been burning because for Blacks, our cry has gone unheard. But the response of the protests, for me, gives me hope because it's a cry for justice. And it's not just Black folks, Black lives, African Americans saying that injustice. For Blacks, we have been victimized, demonized, marginalized, traumatized, and dehumanized over a history of 400 years. And every time a Black man or brown man or woman is killed, we relive that trauma over and over again. And it strips us of life. And we want what everyone else wants, and that is the gift of life. And so I think what we have to do is, I think we've come to a time in our history that doing better is not good enough. We must do better than that. We must unmask systematic evil, racism, and deceptive human practices that oppress humanity in bringing about hopeful solutions for the future. And until we do that, we will not be able to really get to the core of what we need to get to. Time's out for program. Time's out for studies. We don't need to do any more studies. But we need to put the hard work in of being truthful to each other and uniting together in unity and work this out. So people have been asking me, what can I do? I want to have them. And mostly, I'd say 95% have been my colleagues, my white colleagues and friends. And so what we need are allies, people who are no longer silent, people who are willing to speak up, to shout out, and to name things, who believe that color does not set you above another human being. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King wrote a letter from Birmingham jail, and he said, "I am gravely disappointed with the white moderates. You are more devoted to order than to justice, and prefer a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Who parenthetically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who is constantly advising the Negro to wait for a more convenient season." Well, every time we are stripped of humanity, when acts of racism are imposed upon us, the insidious acts of racism continues to hound the hearts and souls of Blacks in America. And we're tired. We're absolutely exhausted and worn out. And there's no other season. The season is now. And I think COVID-19 and George Floyd really brought that face to face. So we're reminded that the Declaration of Independence applied and the Emancipation Proclamation promised meaningful freedom to African Americans. Dr. King said, "It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as its citizens of color are concerned." So the promise has never been fulfilled. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. And so I think the time has come. The time has come, and my hope today is that as I see people rise up, as I see people come together and unite as one, we can solve this, but we have to work this together. I want to end by saying, just adding a few things, is what gives me hope. And I want to start right here in our own city. I've been working with the mayor and the chief of police here in the city of Renton, building bridges with the our police department, have worked with Dr. Pattenaude with our schools where our Black young men were being disciplined at a higher level than any other group. Those are the kind of things, is to hit those hard issues and begin to look at them and say what we can do. So that's the work that we will continue. Had a very good conversation last night with the mayor and the chief, and we continue to do that work. We must continue as a society to undo the mechanical system of racism. Racism is a mechanical system. Racism was put in by human beings. And so therefore, it takes human beings to undo mechanical systems. So we have to begin to look at everyday life. If every one of our decisions, we look at it through the lens of justice in our community and begin to address the harm that has been done through the criminal justice system, through policing, through housing disparity, through education, through hiring and wages and health care, and right those wrongs. That is where we are now. We have no more time to do the small stuff. It's hard work, but we can do it when we come together, realizing that we are one people. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Linda. James,
Yeah, I'll just want to make a couple points. Actually, one of the things that to kind of piggyback off of what Linda said. I mean, when you said we are tired, what strikes me, what gives me hope, is that it's not just we are tired, but in this one, it seems like the world is tired. I mean, when you look at all the protests in the different countries, and maybe it's happened before, but I don't know if on this scale, and that says something. That says something when in other countries where they haven't seen this thing like it is here. I think that I hope that's an incident or an indication that something's turning the corner. What hope will look like for me, it might, I can't remember who said something, maybe Pamela said something, but is whatever actions that are taken that are happening right now. It's because it's right now. It's in the moment. It's still fresh and that sort of thing. What hope will look like to me, if for any individuals out there watching or this crew, any change in behavior, any action you took or you've taken in this angry moment, in this desperate moment, this a moment of despair. Hope is if you're still doing it 6 months later, 3 months later, right? If you've once again, I mean, as long as it's a positive thing, if it's taken root and you said, I need to have these conversations more. I didn't used to have these conversations more. Diane, to your point, you're still educating yourself 3 months later or 6 months later, purposely, not by happenstance. And if you're having maybe tough conversations, if you're actually getting and meeting neighbors who don't look anything like yourself, that sort of thing. I like to keep things simple because in the end, that's how you start dismantling things when you're more purposeful about it, and maybe when you're just even more aware of what your shortcomings are as far as thoughts toward other races, whatever your everybody has prejudices of some sort, not necessarily that it's racist prejudices, but when you're more aware of it, when you realize that you're defaulting to guilty when you should default to innocent, just based on what somebody looks like until they show some guilty action or something. When everybody gets mad when Breonna Taylor's story, hopefully we don't see another one, but when everybody gets mad when somebody sitting in their house apartment is shot dead by the police coming in or with no good reason, whereas you're not defaulting to, well, there must have been something, where we stop making excuses, because I believe the only reason that this thing has taken on the power that it has is because it was there. It was live in person for 8 minutes. There's no excuse. There's no mitigating factor. There's no, well, maybe he was, there's nothing. It's there and it's disturbing. And now you can't look away and you have to say, okay, hold on a second. Even the staunchest individual has to say, well, that didn't make sense. I don't get that. So for me, that's what hope looks like. Prolonged action that's permanent. It could be the smallest of things. I mean, baseball games are won on base hits, not home runs, and so it's like, what are we trying to do to each individually change our behaviors, change our thought pattern, move forward, go out purposely, support a Black business, because on some level it's an economic matter as well. I actually just the other day I printed out, I pulled up on the web, pulled out all the Black businesses in Seattle and Renton and East Side and that sort of thing, and going to make a purposeful effort to patronize those places, on a regular basis. Little things like that, I mean, every action counts. But for me, that's what hopes looks like: prolonged action, and the fact that it seems like the world is tired of this. That's all I'll say for right now.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Diane.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was going to say, hope for me is, out of this bad thing, beautiful conversations are starting, and people who were unaware of what the movement for Black lives looked like are now stopping and taking a look and really going, what happened to Mr. Floyd was wrong, and what can I do, and how can I educate my children to make sure that my children work to create a society that is better than the society that we're in now. And I'd say that. So also part of my hope is what the future is going to look like for our kids. The kids that are, in the Renton School District now, the kids who have cabin fever because they've been inside for 3 months. What is the future going to look like for them? And if we can continue to have these conversations, intentional conversations, and make changes, make substantial changes, I think that's what hope looks like for me.
Dr. Pattenaude?
Just to follow up on a couple of the conversation points, and I agree with James around the notion that it has to be a prolonged effort. And I would take that a step further and say that for those of us serving in kind of formal leadership positions, it's going to have to move from the obligatory statement that we all put out as a result of this to some action. Oh, and that's not necessarily over the short term, that's going to be over the long term. And I think there's this notion of, the window or the mirror. And I think sometimes when actions happen out in the world, we look at it like we're looking through the window, and we can talk about what happened in Minneapolis, or we can talk about what's going on in Seattle, or we can talk about, broadly what's going on in the nation. And I think there's an opportunity for us in Renton to learn about the Black experience in Renton. And I think about John Houston, and I know the mayor had the opportunity to see his presentation as well, where he spoke about the Black experience in Renton and things like around how, the Renton School District took land from individuals, said we were going to build a school there, and then never did, and then sold it to the post office. And so I think that while we're going to look out and talk about these other things that happen in other places, I think we also have the opportunity to learn about what's happened in our own community. Those are the experiences of Black Renton residents, and how we can continue to come together here while we're also trying to heal as a broader community and as a nation.
Thanks, Dr. Pattenaude, and thanks for bringing light back onto to the experiences right here within Renton. As we have come so far, but we do have ways to grow, and looking back upon those experiences certainly can help in that process. Farid, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Diane. I think when I think of hope, and coming out of this, and in this situation and coming out of the situation, I think of the word empathy, and empathy means being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and really understand their feelings and what they're going through and what they've had to deal with. If we can demonstrate now and moving forward long term, like Damien and others have said, that we can demonstrate empathy, only then can we begin to understand what it's like and only then can we begin to move forward towards a positive outcome. And I was talking the other day to Efrem, and Efrem said something to me that knowledge is power. Becoming educated and seeking to understand will go a long way. And just keeping an open mind, opening your heart, having those conversations, the hard conversations, all of that will go a really long ways. And there's so many different ways to support the movement as well. There's peaceful protesting. Some people donate silently. Some people volunteer. There's just so many different ways to move the needle. And by seeking to understand, I think that is really one of the best ways moving forward for us to come together as a community and overcome this, because we can.
Thanks, Farid. I think your reference to empathy is huge, and like you said, these conversations and understanding will help with that approach. Does anyone want to share that we haven't yet heard from Regina?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I am in total aha with my superintendent's comment about centering it back to Renton. I feel like we all have an obligation to our own city. For me personally, I'm raising my babies here. I am committed to the Renton School District for another 18 years because I have an 11-month-old baby. And then I have like all over the spectrum. But I think for us to be honest and own where we are in our current landscape, who we are as a city. And I think that I'm being transparent to say that I am a Black immigrant woman. I may not share the ancestral experiences of some of my colleagues here, but I feel like it's my duty, it's a burden that I have to carry, and recognize that I am living on the shoulders of my other community members who their ancestors have sacrificed so much for someone like me to be here. And like, I'm questioning myself of what's the role that I play. And hope looks like to me for us collectively to really move away from the notion that we have been dancing around for such a long time of like people of color and POC, and really let's just be honest and center, Black, Indigenous and Indigenous folks. Let's center, whose wealth we have deprived and the generational wealth gap that we have created. And really just being honest and not burdening those community members, but it should be our collective burden, because I think we owe that and much more. We owe that and much more. My hope is to see a city of Renton, where I feel really confident and comfortable having my husband and my son be in the city, no matter what time of the day. Hope to me looks like seeing that we are very much supportive of Black leadership and that we stand in solidarity with them and that we really honor their brilliance. Hope looks like to me we're honoring our young Black youth. They're very brilliant, but a lot of times we shut them down. We oppress them, and that's just the honest truth. And hope looks like to me, and justice really looks like to me, how does our collective Renton community, means both the Renton School District, City of Renton, Renton businesses, Renton commerce, Renton community leaders, Renton organizations, all of us, this is all of our burden. How do we center intentional conversations, policies, work forward, not for today, but for generations to come, and legacy work of really doing that work and making commitments and really looking at our city. I live in part of the city where a lot of times I feel like I'm not connected. I only live in that house. A lot of times I find myself being in community in other parts of Renton. And I think we pride ourselves to say that very proudly, Renton is such a diverse city, but really, how does all of our Renton community feel? And how are we really telling their story? To really celebrate that Renton is a diverse city, I think we need to have honest conversations from all generations, the ones that have been here, who have seen history, who have the lived experience, the new ones, and the babies that are growing in Renton. That's just I know I'm committed and I'm just one person. I don't have lived experience. I'm also a new kid on the block because I only been in Renton for 6 years, but I chose to live in Renton. It was very intentional. I moved only 6 minutes away to fall into the Renton School District. It was very intentional. Yeah, I'm gonna end it at that.
Kevin?
Hi there. I'm in a bit of a unique situation in that I'm living a bit of a dichotomy here, being a black man in America and also a police officer. So, I have a lot of hopes in there from both of those sides. My hope from the law enforcement side is that, we'll continue these kinds of dialogues. We'll continue the efforts that we've had with our community members so we can continue to build those relationships. My hope for law enforcement is that there is some kind of reform in tactics and the ways that police behave, because it sickens me that there are a few out there that taint this noble profession that I love. As a black man, I hope that, my kids can grow up safely, and not have to deal with some of the things. A lot of people don't know, but I grew up with the Floyd family. I'm really close with his nephews. We all grew up together. So this one they all hit hard, but this one really hit hard because I'm familiar with that family. So my hope is that, we can right the wrongs, we can clear up these injustices, and we can build a better society for all of us. But really, it's a tough situation for me, again, because not only am I a black man, I'm also a police officer. So I'm dealing with both sides of this thing and trying to navigate all the mess that's going on and get through it. So I appreciate, us having these kinds of discussions, and I just hope they continue so we can continue to move forward and make some progress.
Kevin, I'm gonna pin in on you for a minute here. You many times you hear about the conversations that parents will have with their children of being encountering law enforcement and fears that you have. What is your perspective and approach, being a black father and a police officer? Do you have those conversations? What do your conversations look like, if I can be so bold to ask you that?
You can ask any of the black people in this panel today. We unfortunately have to have that conversation with our children, and that pisses me off. We really shouldn't have to have those conversations, but it's necessary because we want them to stay alive. White parents don't have the conversations that we have with our children because we want our children to be safe. We have to teach our kids how to behave when they interact with the police, and that to me is unfair. I'm a cop. I don't treat anybody unfairly. And I hate that I have to teach my children that, but it's just a way of life right now, and we have to do it. So the conversations are different, and my kids know to respect the law and to listen and try to stay out of trouble. So, and hopefully I'm a role model for them, and not just them. I want to be a role model for really all the children of color in the community, and I hope I'm doing that. I hope I can leave that legacy for them to continue it on.
Thanks for answering that. I know it's impactful to hear that you as a police officer have that same conversation, that it doesn't deviate just with the profession that you have. Rashad, you'd raised your hand. Would you like to?
Mm-hmm. So the hope for me is it looks like is that we keep the same energy around the world, that, it's not just, and I think someone, maybe Dr. Smith, that maybe hit on this before, is like something will happen and then there'll be a strong emphasis on it, and then it'll die off, and then it'll spike back up when the next thing happens. So it's not like a continued energy, and it's been kind of, I think, off and on for probably forever. So that's one hope, to piggyback on what Mr. Keys said about some reforms on things, because that's a lot of what I haven't had a lot of public conversation about any of this, but it's like, for a hope for me, is like, I look at, and I've never been a law enforcement officer, but I look at it like, as a law enforcement officer, I feel like what you've signed up for, in a sense of you're going to be pursuing the quote unquote bad guy, if you will, right? So a lot of that is like, how you approach a situation and tactics and techniques. So my hope for that is just reform, because I think that reform will help a lot of those interactions. And again, not all, and there's going to be some things that maybe don't work out, but at least maybe we reduce them. You know, so it's more, I think, equality in that. So that's my hope, is that, you know, my big thing is, because I look at all the rallies and the protests, and it's like, well, what are we hoping to, like, what's the goal? Okay, we've marched, we rallied, we formed, we've talked. Now what? Like, what's the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish out of all that? And so that, yeah, there's a change, but what specific, right? And so, like, for me, that specific change, I think, is going to go partially with what we said, educating people about, you know, maybe how to interact with law enforcement. Again, it shouldn't be just one specific, you know, group of people, but it is what it is. And then on the other side of the coin is, you know, the reform there. I think that would help. So that's right, my hope.
Thanks, Rashad. You know, you had mentioned something, and Dr. Smith, in conversation this last week, shared what I would hope the outcome, and what we can help contribute to is that this is not just a moment, that this is a movement, and we can continue the process. Efrem, do you want to share or jump in here?
I don't mind jumping in, but, you know, I always, you know, and it's more important that I allow more of the wisdom to be shared by my elders. And so I would leave it to, you know, others to speak, and so I can listen. Honestly, what Dr. Linda Smith spoke on was powerful, and really in my eyes, and it's in, you know, what I'm doing is really trying to take action based off of the things that my elders, or the wisdom that is being shared in this time with me, and putting it into action and putting it into place. You know, definitely feeling a lot of hope and inspiration coming from the youth that we're spending time with at these marches and protests. Really been inspired, but really in a case like this kind of conversation, I really give it to the wisdom of my elders to really share more so than I can. I think that the level of eloquence and the level of knowledge that has been gained by them is really what I'm here to really sponge and just absorb, and based off of those things, and start putting some action behind it. I can say that, you know, really, you know, the last week and a half, 2 weeks have been, you know, as one of the very few Black-owned businesses in downtown Renton, has been kind of a little lonely, but at the same time, it has been, you know, really hopeful, in the sense that there's been just so much support that's been provided, and desire to learn and to grow and to do more, and that's kind of been something that I've been grasping on. These little thin pieces of grass, but I kind of want to leave it at there, at least to start off with, and maybe I'll jump back in and speak on certain things that I feel like I should, but I want to leave it to my elders to speak on more so.
I think Mina wanted to say something, Diane.
So I'm so
James,
excited
I see
to be a part of
you've
this.
unmuted yourself.
Oh,
did you want to?
I was just saying that Mina had been raising her hand a couple of times. I just kind of threw it in real quick.
thanks, James. I just wanted to say that when I got the call from Diane to be a part of this conversation, it instantly brought tears to my eyes, mostly because I think as a brown person that is not considered a part of the Black community, as a person of color in this country, I think especially the last 2 weeks, but honestly my entire life, I have always had that question of where does somebody like me fit in? where does the South Asian fit in into this whole picture and this dialogue? And I think it's been amazing to witness what has been overflowing this last couple of weeks, mostly because it's just kind of blown through a lot, or broken apart a lot of maybe constructs people have had around me. And several things that I have been really wanting to talk about, or tried to engage people around me to talk about, have finally, I don't know, it just occurred to people finally, like, hey, we need to talk about this. So I find it to be really exciting. In my own profession, which I own a video and film production company, I have been really passionate about the idea of telling stories that aren't always told, and to help not just the people who are behind, in front of the camera, be people that might not always find themselves there, but also people behind the camera. Because I'm really interested in the idea of helping to facilitate this conversation. I see myself as being a holder of space, kind of embodying maybe this sometimes high friction place between different sides, and not just as an ally, but as somebody who can leverage my own platform to be used in the service of, right now, 100% the Black community. And I just feel honored to be a witness, a participant in the conversation. So that's all for now.
Thank you, Mina, and thanks for being a part of it today. You know, the irony is I come from a place of great privilege, and to say that I don't understand would be an understatement. I share with you a kind of the ironic thing about me is, in growing up, I owned 2 tanning packages, so I could tan twice a day, because then the tanning salons wouldn't know that I was violating the tanning twice a day, because I wanted darker skin. I was on swim team and I was uncomfortable in my own white skin. And it is something I share with you, but it's nothing that, it doesn't compare. And it doesn't compare to the experiences, and it doesn't compare to the systemic challenges that we face. And I am hopeful with the individuals that are speaking today, that the conversations that we have continue as moving forward, and how we can make change. I am excited. I'm happy that we have the mayor that we have today, that is willing to listen and have the conversation and have the dialogue, that has an empathetic ear. I am thrilled that we have so many people coming to the table that are involved in the lives of youth within our community, that can help change the focus and conversation for the next generation. Rashad.
If I could say something about that, I don't know is this okay to speak on right now, or you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, please.
So to speak to piggyback on what you just said, I think it hits a huge part is the next generation, and I think a lot of that starts with education on that, and again, both ways. And I one of the things, just speaking specifically on our community, and I've gotten to know a lot of the officers, and like, so for me personally, being a lifelong Renton resident, I've never necessarily had a negative encounter with law enforcement. I haven't had many encounters to begin with, but I haven't had negative ones. But I think a lot of it goes to education in the youth. And I don't know necessarily how to do that, but so growing up back in my day, there was programs like DARE, and there was different ways where officers started interacting with youth at a much younger age. And so there was always a thought of like, there wasn't like us versus them. But what I think a lot of people have to understand nowadays, and like I was talking to someone about, was a lot of it starts at home, right? For some kids, because it's like they have family members who have been impacted. Maybe my dad had a bad interaction with the cops, and then, you know, dad comes home and says, you know, F the police. And so now as a kid, that's my mentality. So now when I see a police, it's like, oh, F the police immediately, because that's what I'm getting from home. I haven't had an interaction, but that's what my dad says, and that's my dad. So I'm going to follow that lead. And then I think that plays a large role in the interaction then, that when if for some reason that kid is contacted by an officer, right? Immediately when that kid is contacted, there's all these thoughts of, oh, you know, the police, you know, roughed my dad up for whatever, and my dad says that's the police. So immediately there's going to be a friction. And then if an officer comes in, you know, aggressively or hot or, you know, whatever, that's a recipe for disaster. Whereas I think if there were maybe some way to have some more education around that, or find a way to bridge those barriers and gaps in our community between officers and kids at a younger age, I think those things would be helpful. I know what I can speak to, like, so we have a school resource officer at our school at Renton High School, and does a phenomenal job in terms of relationship building, and he's been able to help kids in and out of school. And I think a lot of that, in terms of having a school resource officer, it has to be the right person. Like that's huge. But at the end of the day, that kind of mentality has to be, I think, to an extent there with all of the officers, because this is the community that they're serving and that we're serving. So I think, you know, just kind of having, my point with that is having that relationship, having that officer in the school is tremendous. Like he's, you know, and he's been able to help on a lot of levels, and to a lot of kids, he actually has become, you know, one of their most inspirational or memorable staff members, is the school resource officer. So I think those kind of things help, and being able to see officers in a positive light too. You know what I mean? I think that helps, because if everything we're seeing is negative, then that's what gets planted in our mind. I think a lot can say about the same thing for people of color on, you know, a lot of roles that were portrayed in movies or TV shows. It's the drug dealer or the criminal or this. And for a person who doesn't interact with a lot of people of color, as crazy as this is going to sound, that's what they've processed in their mind when they see a person of color. And so that's but some of the work that I try to explain to my students at Renton, you know, when to them, like, and I won't be too much, I'll cut it off here, but like when they dress a certain way, it's just them expressing themselves, you know, whether it's wearing a do-rag or how they wear their clothes or whatever. And I get that because I'm from this community and I can relate to them, and I understand that, or I know the kid. But like I explained to them, when they go off into the community, people don't know you, and they know what you look like, and immediately begin to form, you know, all kind of stereotypes and things. And so when you go into businesses and you carry yourself a certain way and you look a certain way, unfortunately, you're going to be treated a certain way. And that's just the reality of society. So I think, you know, my way to try to counteract that is to teach them, not that you can't be yourself, not that you can't express yourself, but understand that when you're doing that, what you are perpetuating in society, unfortunately. So just my 2 cents on that.
And to that point, if I can add some, oh, Diane, were you going to say anything important? Okay. A couple things come to mind. So yeah, there is the, you know, the exposure maybe to the police for the kids, so they get more comfortable, and they combat those negative messages they get at home and that sort of thing. But, we're also talking about the systemic racism and that sort of thing. And it goes beyond the police. It goes beyond, it goes into society where, only certain people get upset and they see certain things. Certain people, Farid talked about empathy. Well, maybe in that vein, empathy, there are some people out there who, when they see, maybe not George Floyd, but some of these other things, they think, oh, well, that's them. And they don't necessarily think that I might think, well, but for the grace of God, that could be me. When they see Breonna Taylor door get kicked in and she's killed, they don't think in a million years that could happen to me. Wow, that's a shame. And I think when that, how do we get people to put themselves in those shoes just systemically? Now, one of the things I've always said, when I went to college in kind of northern Indiana, and quite frankly, there were people there when I got there. There were white people who had never, believe it or not, never seen a Black person in person in their life. They are from somewhere southern Indiana and that sort of thing. There also were Black people from like Gary, Indiana, who they had seen white people in person, but they didn't have much interaction. They knew from TV. They were doctors and lawyers and that sort of thing. Funny thing. So they come with these preconceived notions, these stereotypes, and they're going to happen. Like Rashid said, they're going to happen. You're going to have them no matter what. But a funny thing happened during those 4 years to people, and they started to interact. And the guys interacted with guys, and girls interacted with girls, and they found out, well, you know what? They were different, but they weren't as different as they thought. They all cared about the same thing in college, hey, partying and whatever it is. But you could see. I personally saw some of these prejudices, these stereotypes melt away because there was actual interaction, and so that's what when we talk about how do we come together as a society? Well, there's always going to be this them and us until we just become the we, until we actually make purposeful action, take purposeful action. Like I said, something as simple as get out and meet one of your neighbors, maybe of another race that you thought, because you have these notions. And then you find out all of a sudden, oh, they like the things I do. Or they even like the same music I do. And even if they don't, who cares? But, overall, when you combine that with what Rashid's talking about and the kids, with the police. Now, Kevin, I have one thing to ask you real quickly as well. But that needs to happen when you actually, and this might sound silly, but you're talking to your kids, and maybe you ask your kids because you've seen their friends. You say, hey, Bob, how come you don't have any Black friends? Or if you're white, hey, how come you don't have any? If you're Black, how come you have any white friends? Or whatever race. I mean, what's going on there? What kind of, even that question? I want to hear what you're thinking. Why are you gravitating? And we all gravitate to people that are most like us in whatever kind of way. But we just kind of, parents, I think, they turn a blind eye. They say, well, it's natural, but it just kind of perpetuates that separation. And so you have spots of one person has one, minority friend or this and that and the other. But what are we doing to really make sure that, and it's not just happening organically, that to make sure that everybody is really understanding and getting rid of as many of those stereotypes as possible. The other thing I want to say really quickly, and I'll stop talking, because I heard, I don't know, Bill Maher was talking the other day or whatever. I think part of the thing from the police standpoint, Kevin, I'd like you to comment on this. Until we get police who regularly call out other cops who are doing stuff they aren't supposed to be doing. I mean, you had 3 other people there, and then they finally got charged, but you had 3 other people there, and no one at any point said, hey, yo, man, get off his nag. I mean, he's not moving. because there's that, I know there's that code or whatever it is. I mean, how realistic, how hard is that? Because I know there's blowback, and I know being a policeman cannot be easy. You're subject to a lot of the negative, the bad guys and that sort of thing. So you're going to form uh, judgments about things. But comment on that if you would.
Really, I mean, it boils down to culture, right?
Mhm.
It's the culture of that police department. It's been allowed for generations, and it's the culture that's ingrained in that police department. And if you think about it, if you look at these incidents across the nation, a lot of that stuff is happening in the Midwest, in the South, in the East, right? Because I'm a little bit biased in that regard, because policing on the West Coast is elite, and we have the best training, we have great salaries, we have great cultures. The Renton Police Department, our culture of integrity, professionalism, service. I mean, these are the things we value, and when we hire, we have to have people of that caliber. So we're talking about culture. We're talking about a system where guys come up doing that kind of, they're allowed to continue that kind of behavior, right? And nobody checks them for a lot of reasons. And the one you hit on was that, it's that, hey, if I don't fall in line with everybody else, where's my backup? Who's going to protect me out there? So it's just different policing, man. When you look at my salary, and I'm thankful for the mayor and and the city council, and they're very supportive of us, right, our community. But I know guys on the East Coast. I have a friend that works in Cincinnati PD. We're talking about cops that make $12 an hour to put their life on the line, right, with minimal training and poor equipment, right? So there's a difference, and there is a huge difference. And until we can, again, come up with some unified way uniform way to train police officers nationally, then so we're all consistent, right? We all get the same training. We all behave the same way. I mean, a lot of this stuff, until they change those cultures, it's just, you're going to continue to see this stuff. It's unfortunate, but really that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, because we're still dealing with human beings. We expect police officers to be Superman and that sort of thing, and women. That's not happening. So, okay, so how do we change everything around them so that, they have a better understanding of,
Have to be held accountable first, right?
What's that?
They have to be held accountable. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, for their bad behavior, they really have to start holding these people accountable. And that's really the bottom line.
A quick interjection to say, being respectful of everybody's time. We know we're over that 7:00 point. We did talk to the participants ahead. If you need to fall off, please, we appreciate the time that you're here. If you would like to continue in dialogue, thank you, and we'll continue. There was a question that came in the chat, and it is talking about, if we continue in this online virtual environment, what approach are we also simultaneously taking to influence parents who will be better positioned to facilitate these follow-up conversations at home? And I think that's we've touched on it here, but I throw that question out, especially to the parents and to Pamela and Rashad in your positions as educators.
You kind of broke up. Could you repeat it to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the question is, it's what approach, especially with the online environment, what approach are we also taking to influence parents who will be better positioned to facilitate these follow-up conversations at home? And either of you or Regina, I did see your hand up too.
Yeah, I can chime in just a little bit. So we work with families across South King County, and we reach about 4,500 families in South King County, particularly focusing on the roadmap region. And particularly in Renton, we reach, we're very intentional about the areas within the Renton School District that we reach. So we really focus a lot Skyway, West Hill, and the Sunset, because we know the disconnect, particularly in those neighborhoods that fall under Renton School District, and also that's a beautiful, diverse, and rich, resilient community that a lot of times gets dismissed. And a lot of the things that we have been collecting from families as far as data goes and disseminating that is really around where is the responsibility about the collective community taking ownership and responsibility about educating their children. And I say that yesterday I had the privilege of being on a Zoom meeting with our middle schoolers. And what broke my heart was that we had few students that said all lives matter when we were talking about Black Lives Matter. And those of us that were adults in the Zoom continues to explain to them that, yes, all life does matter. However, right now, Black liberation is liberation for all. That when we actually center Black liberation, that's when we actually are really centering anti-racist and combating anti-Blackness. And I think a lot of our families that a lot of times experience some of the things that we experience, we have been doing our job. And this goes back to our allies, or maybe not our allies, of what is your responsibility in educating your children. And this past Saturday, we ran an institute of families throughout South King County, and particularly our Renton families are majority Black and also Black immigrants. And it was really disheartening because they said that we don't know, we keep throwing these words of what does life look like, after this. And they said that we can't pause, and we really need to turn things back into people who might be in place of power and influence, that you really have to be clear about the stand you're taking, but it can't just be conversation. We need clear 3 action items, and you need to follow through. And we're willing to participate in that conversation. But I think a lot of our families are just sick and tired of being sick and tired of, and that's just the honest truth. I'm not trying to sound an angry human being, but that's just the reality. I'm not a Black Indigenous, but just being in Renton as a parent, I've really experienced some horrible things. And that's how my whole work started in Renton. I've had people not, say they're gonna uphold a principal's decision, even though I had a 7-year-old that a white kid took a scissor and cut her hijab off. And I'm twice, not once, choke her in the parking lot. And I'm for God's sakes, if we don't make a stand in this, and we have a different leadership, and I'm very proud of our current leadership at Renton School District. We really are making changes, but it's not about the district. This is about the Renton community. Because we may say this is a school issue. No, systems interact with each other. It's not just a police problem. It's not a city problem. It's a collective problem. It's a collective Renton community problem that needs to be addressed. And as someone that serves families, I am not gonna put the burden on our parents, particularly parents that have been doing their job, who have been protecting their children, who have been advocating for their children, and who a lot of times as residents, we haven't listened to them. So I shared in the chat that my hope above all is that this conversation is a continuous conversation, and not just opportunity for us to come together in the evening to talk, but to really as a community make a collective action items. Sometimes community just needs a little milestone, so for us to feel really hopeful and to feel like our time is being valued and we're investing in the right thing. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to say.
Thanks so much, Regina. Pamela.
The thing I was thinking about is the idea around silence indicates acceptance. And families need to engage in these conversations with their kids, period. Because if they don't, they're going to hear from someone else. And that's going to continue to shape the lens that their students or their kids are looking at. So I think engaging in those conversations, being very diligent and just seizing those teachable moments, naming differences as gifts and as beautiful things, and just engaging in those conversations, not shying away from it, is just going to be very important.
James?
I just want to add one because Pamela took the words out of my mouth, and I'm going to broaden it further than parents to kids. Silence, period, indicates, hey, acceptance, and it really needs to be, as corny as it sounds, where just the public takes on the see something, say something mentality. Even if it's a friend of yours and they do something, say something that is just out of bounds. There's power in saying, hey, what was that? That wasn't, so and a lot of people may believe it or may think it, but they just kind of say, or whatever it is. But, and I don't, maybe even if it's a stranger, hey, that's unacceptable. There's power in somebody saying, that was really unacceptable. The way it lands, a lot of people don't have the cojones to say it to friends, much less strangers. But, that's the thing that starts to really take hold. I mean, there are certain things in society. Think about it. There are certain words, and I'm not talking about the N word. I'm talking. There are certain words that, quite frankly, you watch a television show 20 years ago that people say now that seem like they say now and they say, "Whoa, that what is that? That's unacceptable." Well, because enough people actually bought on, or jumped on the bandwagon there, or believed and said, no, you can't say that. That's not even remotely cool. And so that needs to go with actions. That needs to go. I mean, everybody on that block around George Floyd, not just those people there. I think most of them seem to be minority. Everybody should have been around the cop saying, get off of him, get up, period. I mean, and that's the thing that baffles me, where just people just won't speak up when they know something is wrong. And, like I said, Pamela, I was just about to say that. I mean, yeah, parents definitely, the kids, but it's just overall to your neighbors, to your people in Renton. I mean, let it start someplace where to say, look, you take that someplace else. That's unacceptable. And I think if the people watching this, if you just really took inventory of how many times you don't say something until you get home and you tell your friends or your family, oh, you never believe what I heard. I think you'd be surprised. So, I mean, sometimes, you keep it simple and you can make some decent impact. And that's all I'll say. Armando, you look like you might have joined into the witness relocation program for a second there. I'm just joking. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I'll add something to that because I do agree with you, and I think that is something that a lot of us are struggling to remind ourselves right now, that it is important for us to speak up. But I also think as leaders, sometimes people know not to say certain things around me. You know what I mean? And I'm going to guess that people know not to say certain behaviors or traits around you as well, and everyone in this meeting. The thing about it is, I think in a situation like what we saw with George Floyd, I think most people would, if you saw a civilian doing that to someone, would have gotten. The question is, it's a police officer, it's a position of authority, and that is where people get a little more like not wanting to engage. So I think that's where a lot of that conversation needs to go. But I will say, to Regina's note, we do need to get involved. You're absolutely right. We need to reach out to each other in Renton. I feel so grateful to have been raised in a community, and even being on this conversation with so many Renton High grads, there is something so powerful about the education that nobody talks about here in Renton, which is how diverse it is. So yes, children are mean. Yes, there's these interactions that happen at school that are unnecessary, maybe from past behaviors at home. But you do get an education just being around, like you said, Pamela, naming your differences is a gift, like being around it. So when you get out into the world, you see that people who are different, don't look like you, don't act like you, don't come from the same background, really do have a value. And I think in Renton, we're already, to be cheesy, ahead of the curve on that for many different communities. But we do have a lot of work to do. And it is, how do we engage those communities? moving forward instead of just having a conversation. And I love that what you said, Regina, about having your 3 bullet points of about what we can all do personally to reach out. And Renton is we really have this potential right now to be this model for what other cities can do, because we are so diverse and we are willing to come to the table and have these conversations. And I think, like, when I look back at how diverse Renton schools were when I was there, and now I watch my niece and nephew and it's even more diverse, it really gives me hope, because it's just like a generation away from getting better and better. But how do we push that? How do we push it into the next ballpark? That's it.
James and Pamela, you've spoken, and Mary too, about really taking inventory and showing up. I just today, something happened around me, and it struck a chord, and I didn't say something, and I've been dwelling on it since, saying I should have said something. And I think it's easily dismissed as, if I just say something, they're going to dismiss it. They have their way of thinking anyway. But the reality is, many people don't know that they're ignorant. And sometimes it takes that reminder. And if not a reminder to their ignorance, if you continue to remain in that ignorance, that's when there's a problem. And so speaking out and bringing attention to it is important. And thank you very much for that reminder. You know, we're getting to the 7:30 mark, and your time is incredibly valuable. Your contributions today and showing up as a leader within our community is so appreciated, and starting the conversation. And we hope that we can reach out and continue to have these conversations, and that you will look to us as allies and facilitators and connectors and champions in the ways that we can be. My daughter told me not too long ago. She said, being a hopeful person does not lead to a bright and shiny life, but instead it's one of the most difficult and painful things you can do with your life. But you cannot give up being a hopeful person if you are one, because the world loses hope every day. And I look around at the people that are here today, and it brings my heart great warmth to know that we have a community full of leaders that are hopeful and that are willing to take part, to change our future, and to make a difference. Is there anything before we close out that anybody else would like to bring forward? Pamela?
I was just reflecting on James's comment about like the importance of saying something. And I know that with where we are now, the focus has been on police. But, you know, I think as another one of my hopes is that we've got to extend that to the systems that have been put in place, not just the police, but I think of the many times that education and the school systems that have been put in place that are putting knees on babies, on the knees of babies. And I think just even in schools, we've got to say something when we look at our discipline rates and how just the disproportionality of the boys being referred more than girls. When we think about students of color, our Black students, our Black boys being referred more, you know, a knee is being put on their neck. When we think about redlining, when we think about all the other things around just systems. So I just encourage everyone that, yes, we're right now we're laser focused on Mr. Floyd because in the police, but my hope is that we don't look so much at that and dismiss and miss opportunities to continue conversations around dismantling and disrupting other things that are also putting the necks or putting the knees on necks.
Just to add, just not, I mean, honestly, what Pamela just what Pamela said, there's nothing more to really add to what she just said, but at the beginning, she had mentioned that that we're at a point where it's similar to COVID, where you know, a great change happened, and it was an opportunity to start thinking differently and acting differently and putting new systems in place, whether for business or in our own lives as it related to COVID. I think it's the same thing here. Historically, you know, George Floyd is one of hundreds of thousands. And my saying has been that hopefully George Floyd is the last, that with him it's the last. And that from this point on, some changes can come about, whether it is in schooling, in policing, in all aspects of our society, where Black men and women are considered less than or have preconceived notions that are all negative. Because you know, it's an opportunity to change it, and I'm just hopeful that that is the case, that comes out of this, that it isn't us, you know, just a quick flash in a pan, basically a quick something we're all reacting to here today, and then a month or less than that even, you know, we're back to doing the same old thing. I think, you know, maybe it is the pandemic, the fact that most of us are at home, high unemployment, a lot more attention can be placed on this, and people are listening a little bit more versus in times in the past. But whatever the case may be, I hope it's something that as a society we can all, whether just as even on our local basis as Rentonites, we can take some deeper looks at ourselves and in the places that we're in to make greater changes. And I leave it with that. But thank you.
Thanks for all that you do and all you do within the community and the sense of the continued sense of community that you generate with your presence and being. I am honored today to have all of you join us tonight in conversation, and I am humbled by the friendship that I share with you, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of the process and to remain as a friend and to continue to walk not just alongside of you, but in front of you and behind you and uplift you when the moments arise, and to help maintain this as a movement and not just a moment. And thank you for putting yourselves in a position of this vulnerable and candid conversation. And I look forward to the conversation continuing.
Well, thanks for arranging this, Diane. I mean, quite frankly, I think this could go on for another 3, 4, 5 hours, to be quite honest. So, you know, we squeezed a lot into a little bit of time. So maybe we can do it again one day in some other similar or different context, but I appreciate the opportunity to even have the discourse.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks
To everybody. Farid, thank you very much for the magic that you create and for being a part of the process tonight. Rashad, thanks for joining us with the little one. And to everybody, thanks for all that you're doing and the difference that you're making in the community. And Armando, thank you to you as the mayor, and for your willingness and commitment to make a difference and make a change. It is appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. And I really hope that all the individuals that joined us tonight are willing to continue this conversation. I know that the city has a lot of things planned internally, and I think it's going to be important that we have voices at the table already. There's the inclusion task force, but I don't think that's the only group that needs to be involved at this point. I think that we're in a time and place where there's more room at the table for more voices. So hopefully you'll all be involved and help us move the city forward. I think that in the end, my hope would be that as a community, we can identify the injustices and make the tough decisions to make the changes. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I guess that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank guys.
Bye-bye.